Hello, I'm Luigi.
What needs to be said about Super Mario 64? I mean, honestly, who hasn't played this game at some point in their life? My first experience playing this game was on the DS port, Super Mario 64 DS. Only later did I play the original game on the Wii Virtual Console. This is just to show the length of how many times this game has been re-released. So let's count it up. First, we had the original 64 game, then we had the DS port, the Wii port, the Wii U port, the 3D All-Stars collection, and then finally the Switch port. And by the way, this is just Nintendo consoles. I didn't even mention different patches or the iQube, a Chinese re-release of the Nintendo 64. So I think it's a fair assumption to assume that everyone in their lifetime has played this game at some point, or at least know about this game in some way. But that's not the focus of today's video. You saw the thumbnail, you saw the title of the video. Today is about Mario 64's soundtrack. I think Mario 64 is the point where the core Mario sound was developed. I mean, really think about it. Where did Mario get more jazz-like elements to its sound? You could say it was the very first Mario game, since that game's main theme is based off a T-Square track named Sister Marion. Good song, by the way, you should listen to it. But I think that Mario 64 solidified Mario's sound. Whenever I think of the Mario sound, my mind tends to go towards Mario 64. Even if the later Mario games didn't copy the sound exactly, like Sunshine's more tropical instrumentation, or Galaxy's more orchestral tone. I think Mario 64 creates a very fun atmosphere, which the game sells to you perfectly. The game's soundtrack is full of classics, and many more tracks that offer more than many think. The scope and range of the game's soundtrack is quite large, with each level having an original or reused track, which often perfectly fits the location. So for this video, I want to cover each track in the game that is tied to a level or a cutscene. So tracks that are just a quick transition or SFX will not be included in the video, like the Toads. Even though many of these sound effects are very recognizable, the time to explain each of these will just be unwarranted in my eyes. Of course, I will include music theory ideas and concepts, like chords or musical phrases. And by the way, since Mario 64 has many re-releases of the game's soundtrack in sheet music or MIDI form or any other kind of medium like that, this made my job way easier, by the way, so let's get started. A reimagining of the main theme from the very first game. The main theme from Super Mario Bros. On the NES is played on a steel drum, a pitch percussion instrument often used in genres like reggae or calypso. I really adore the track's percussive groove. It takes after a jungle groove, using lots of drum kit with bass and a snare drum, along with a hi-hat. The track is instantly recognizable, being the very first thing you hear after hearing Mario talk for the very first time. I think this track had to sell the player right away, being the very first song you hear in the game. And not even just that, also considering it's part of the Mario 64 title screen, one of the most iconic screens in gaming. I mean, come on, the thought of creating original work for this track alone is quite a task, so Koji Kondo really cooked on this track. Also, you can control Mario's face on it, so that's pretty cool. This is an iconic track, and I think it really fits well for the title screen. A very short cutscene track, following Lakitu around the castle, which was many people's first look into a 3D environment in a video game. The strings play a pattern of repeating eighth notes, ascending in pitch to reach the melody, which also follows over the strings. One thing I thought was quite interesting was the chords in the song, considering the song is in a very simplistic key of C, but the bass is ascending in half steps, leading to a pattern of a D flat major 7, a D minor, A diminished, to an E minor. This use of chromatics creates a tension in the music, leading to a resolution. But we don't get a resolution in the track, with the ending having a C minor 7, adding a 9, to a C minor 7, with the 9th before leading into the 1. Another thing of note is how we end up from a C major to a C sharp minor, but due to the chromatics involved, along with the cadence being a minor 2 to a minor 1, an odd resolution to the piece, considering it doesn't follow a standard cadential format, like a 4 to 1, 5 to 1, or just a 5. It almost resembles like a perfect authentic cadence, but it's really weird because it's not a 5-to-1, it's a 2-to-1. But the only cadential pattern I can think of that comes to my mind would be a plagal cadence, which is a 4-to-1. But the 2 isn't inverted into a 4 kind of sound, it's just a minor 2 to a 1, so it's a really odd resolution. In context of the music though, it leads to the player feeling really uneasy, and I think this really works well into the story. It leads to something more, I think, as if Mario is in more than just some cake. It's often cited as the main theme of the game, being used in many of the promotional materials, being lots of the levels, and also just being the main theme associated with the game. Hell, even in the soundtrack it is labeled Mario 64 main theme. What can I honestly say that's not been said before? This is just an iconic track. The main theme being heard is just this jazzy melody being played of this funky and silly instrument. It has almost a vocal sound to it. Another main component is the brass lines, being quite punchy, and adds power to the chord structure of the song. The iconicness of the track is nothing to be underestimated, as personally, I think this might be the top 3 most iconic game tracks of all time. Not even just the main game where it's being played in, I think of like every single soundtrack combined. This song is just iconic. This is a staple of every top 10 most relaxing game songs of all time. I mean, honestly, it's in every single like relaxing game soundtrack playlist. Regardless of that, the way the piano leaves you in a trance, and soothing underwater sound effects, everything about this song just kind of works. The melody has an odd way of keeping the underwater vibe going, almost bobbing under and over the water. The song only gets better once the percussion enters. The drum set has a way of changing this once peaceful song to a very upbeat one. I'm not a big fan of water levels. I can't honestly stand them. They're just kind of annoying to play with. The camera just does what it wants all the time, and it's just not my thing. But the track at least soothes those pains and grudges. With its tone and ambiance, it solidifies its place in some of the greatest video game tracks ever written. In my mind, this is what Christmas sounds like. The oompa feel of the accompaniment and the ride bell just give it a very jolly-like rhythm and tone. Also, don't forget that the song also has sleigh bells to it, which is a Christmas sound staple. This is what wintertime would sound like in a Mario game. Cartoonishly Christmas, which perfectly matches the levels it's featured in. The melody features an almost brassy string sound. I can't figure out what it quite is, but the melody takes listeners to highs and lows in just one phrase. In the later half of the piece, this plucked string instrument along with the horn give it a very cold and carol-like melody. Finally, the track loops back after a quick bridge to the main phrase. is a very cartoonish-like winter melody that I think perfectly matches what Mario kind of sounds like. It's very fun. This song just sounds like you're trapped in the middle of a desert, which it kind of is partially, as it matches this really open and wintry scenery, but it also plays in a lava-filled volcano stage. The way the low, reedy brass sound just functions to give the effect of being hot, along with the string melody, as well as the woodwind accompaniment, the level sounds very drained of life. It sounds very dry. I remember a little bit ago playing this on my trombone, and it was just a very funny thing to play, as the tone of the song itself is not taking itself very seriously. I find it very odd that the music matches the levels too perfectly, as if it can never work in any other game series besides Mario, I think. It could be in just the way the song is written, but it's very cartoonishly desert sounding. It's not, like, too serious, like Ocarina of Time's Desert Temple or something like that. It's just a very, very, very cartoonishly fun desert song. This track just sounds really moist. The reverb they used gives it a large and spacious sound. This track is a remix of the original underground music from the first Mario game. The thing I find very cool is that the melody is played on a slap bass, which is a more rhythmically used sound along with percussion, which gives the melody a really cool sound to it. Another thing I noticed during the song was the clave, which uses a standard clave beat. Mario 64 is filled with these reggae themes, sounds, and rhythms, which obviously gives the game a lot more life and rhythm to it. The ambience is also a major part of this track, which gives the track more space, which also is another part of the whole game's kind of soundtrack. Ambiance works a lot in Mario 64's favor, which gives the tracks a lot more of like an environmental feel to it, which gives them the feel of being these large, lived-in locations. This is one of my favorite tracks in the entire game, as I really did the slap bass and the environmental vibe of the song. I think it perfectly matches the stages that it plays in. To be honest with you, I don't know what Kondo was smoking when he made this nightmarish track. The breathy chords and the ambiance, as well as the frantic notes are also considered in. It's just almost too much. This track is very unnerving, obviously. It's a haunted house level, obviously, duh. But it only gets really worse when you pass by the piano in the actual stage. And I think everybody has the experience of just passing the piano for the very first time, and my first time with that, oh my god. I hated this level as a kid, I really did. The song doesn't really fit in a Mario game, which it oddly kind of makes it fit in. I just really can't explain it very well, but it's just the way the song works. The way, like, the scope of the soundtrack is considered in. This is on the very, very far end of what you think Mario would sound like. But I think it works in a weird kind of way. It's like you're putting this really cartoonishly weird character into a very, like, serious, very creepy kind of environment. And it's like you were just jumping around in green scenery. And then you go right to this nightmare level. I think it just works. It's very weird to explain, but I just like the song in a weird way. It's a very weird. It's a very love-hate relationship with the song. I kind of like it. To be honest with you, I feel the exact same way I feel about this song about the slider. This track is just honestly obnoxious. Definitely my least favorite song in the entire soundtrack. It's just honestly unbearable. But it does take after real merry-go-round music. So at least they got that part right of the song. The looping does not do the song any favors, as it gets quite annoying after just one loop. Fortunately, the song only plays in one room, so that one star gets itself. Once I'm done with that one star, I always try to avoid this room as much as I possibly can after beating that one star. I don't even want to talk about the song anymore. Writing this script and listening to the song over and over, not fun. This song is just a joy to listen to, honestly. My mind always goes for the DS version's title screen, along with the castle, in that weirdly placed black square. I never got what they were playing with that kind of thing. I don't know if that was unused or was like an idea they had earlier on, but it's just a weird placement, which honestly, back in retrospect, it makes me think of the Waluigi and Mario 64 DS rumors. Anyway, the serene flute and the choir company fit together very nicely. I always find it a shame that the track is so short, but due in part to being a file select theme, it shouldn't have dragged on much more anyway. This track is very memorable. I had never forgotten about this song. Maybe it's the way the melody just loops, vocal chords, or just something else about it. It's just a very nice track to listen to. I think many people reminisce on this track a lot, even more than the other songs in the game's soundtrack, creating this really nostalgic vibe to it. It's the song used for the help world in the game. The strings and orchestral tone give off a feeling of royalty and grandeur, as the large scale of the building is being taken in. The track has a way of just pulling you around. As you explore more of the castle, the scale of the piece also matches the experience of roaming around the castle walls. I also find it quite interesting. As soon as you leave the castle's interior and go to the garden or the outside, the courtyard area, it makes you want to go back into the castle to feel safer, I guess you would say. It's almost kind of creepy in a weird way, but in a fun way, I would say. Despite that, the track is always a joy to listen to, especially in the later games, reusing the melody for games like Mario Odyssey, being almost a remake of the track. is a remix of the Invisibility Star found in other games, using a more light and plucky sounds to it, like a violin and a guitar. This track really takes the power aspect and flips it on its head, and oddly makes the player feel lighter than they did before. I think the motif of the star power really works well with the vanishing cap, considering that Mario can really walk through walls. But the tone and style really work well with the wing cap, so the lighter feel really matches both of these power-ups very well. Wow, this track is just heavy. The main theme for the star power is still used here, but the melody is part of the bass and heavy orchestral hits. The music definitely matches the more metallic and heavy feel of the metal cap, which it obviously should, considering it turns Mario into, metal. This is definitely my favorite of the two power-up songs. I just enjoy the beat more, as well as the instrumentation choices along with the track. I just found recently that in the new Mario Wonder game, they have a remix of this track, and it just sounds really good. So I'm glad they at least reused this song in some modern Mario game. So that's a cool thing, I guess. This chaotic track has been a nightmare since I have gotten the game. This track is just very annoying to listen to. I think it's the guitar or banjo sound they used, but my god, is it just infuriating to listen to. But I think it matches the level design perfectly, these bonus rooms. It adds a almost minigame sound to it. The melody just keeps going on and on and on. It just keeps going where it wants to, not guided by the limitations of the music. The bassline also follows this really halftime jazz feel, which gives it this really kind of bouncy kind of feel to it. Definitely not my favorite track in the whole game, probably being one of my least favorite songs of all time, but I think it at least fits well into the game's soundtrack. A very calming track that's played around the piranha plants when they sleep. The soundtrack includes the in-game version along with the arranged version played by a piano, rather than mouth percussion like glockenspiel and marimba. I think that while the track is quite short, the peaceful music is more than enough to keep you listening. One thing Mario 64 does really well, I think, is relaxing music, using a lot of minor chords with different inversions. There's not much more to say about this track, honestly, as it is quite short, but it's still one of my personal favorites from the entire soundtrack. Just a very nice track to listen to when you're relaxing, I guess. It's just a very relaxing track. Honestly, this is a really goofy track in my opinion, and I think it takes itself way more seriously than it should, which oddly kind of works because the bosses think they can beat Mario. This guy takes on Bowser every 2 to 3 weeks maximum. You think you can really even make a dent in Mario? Anyway, the grand feel of the track plus the low string runs makes this for a more tension-filled battle if you were like 5 years old. These bosses are easily defeatable, which is what I said earlier, obviously, but it fits the tone quite well. The one thing that tracks make good work of is the low string runs, which are mostly in the viola and cello. Once the brass comes in for the chord progression, it really adds to the large feel of the song. This song is nothing too special, but it's still a memorable one for me at least. This track hits you right away with those brass triplets, descending an octave. This gets the player right on their toes right away. The rest of the track uses a lot of tension, which is used obviously to make the player feel anxious about fighting Bowser for the very first time, or second, or third. The track also uses a lot of brass stabs, mostly in the low brass, specifically the trombone, which has a very decent range from a real low to a moderately high. The main melody is played by a vocal-like sound, which plays a lot in the Lydian mode, considering the song is in F. But the B flat is played a half step up to a B natural, or in the key of F, the sharp 4, which is also referred to as a tritone. This is often used to add a very tensious feel, as you expect the 4 to sound one way, but the 4 offers a different sound. The way the Lydian mode works, it takes after the dominant of each key. So for example, in the key of F, the dominant, or the 5, is a C. In the key of C, there's no B flat. So the sharp 4 is just the T to Do in the key of C. The next melody that plays comes from a pluck string. This melody is played more for an harmony along with the main melody. This track offers a more military/march feel to it, which works great for building tension with the upcoming battle for Bowser, considering he is considered general of the Koopa army. This is the boss theme used for most of the Bowser fights, which has a really tight groove in the percussion. The main instruments being used are the organ and this growly bass, which also might just be the organ sound they used. The music takes after a gothic tone and has a very large scale, which in my mind could oddly work in the Castlevania series. This song makes Bowser seem much larger than he already is, which works well for the incoming boss fights. I mean, I know in the 2D Marios he's quite large, but I think in the Mario 64 his scale is played much more, like he's quite large, even more than he was in the older games. So the track works perfectly in that regard. This track is a tension-filled nightmare, even while we're writing the script. Listening to this song gives me a flight or fight response. However, the design of the piece gives the feeling of looping and increasing in pitch, which gives its song a never-ending ring to it. The chords follow a pattern of a tritone and an enharmonic major third. Trust me, if hearing the word tritone didn't set you off, the sound is borderline insane. I think this is the least pleasing song to listen to the entire soundtrack, but it works in the application of the game at least. This song is truly like a nightmare to listen to. That's why it's so memorable, because it's such an obnoxious song to listen to, and it's quite scary, in terms of what it does to the player. If the organ wasn't already scary in the regular boss fights, this amps it by 10, with an even more gothic and larger-than-life feel to it. The design of the piece strikes fear into the player, with a strong bass in the left hand, and the looping complexity of the right hand gives it a feeling of rising and falling, similar to the looping steps, that leads right into this level. The grandeur of the track is off the charts, in my opinion. It truly feels like the end of times for Mario. I don't know how Kondo envisioned Bowser to sound. The track really gives Bowser a much larger-than-life feel. Along with the lighting of the stage, the music works really well for this boss fight. It's something you'd listen to once in your life, I think. This plays when Peach returns to the castle, playing her castle's main motif on a harpsichord, an older style piano. We then get a standard load string duet, playing the main theme when Mario saves Peach in the original Mario Bros. Game. The song really takes after theme's main thematic motifs from both a classic and a new modern source, creating one singular theme for the character. The track is quite nice, showing off Peach's personality, whilst also having a very royal tone to the song. It really adds to her grandeur, I would say. Man, what an ending theme. This track really makes the player reminisce on their journey, showing off many of the locations they had visited throughout the game. Whenever I play this game, I'm never ready to listen to this track, because it means that my playthrough is coming to a climatic close. For context, I usually play Mario 64 about once a year, just a light tradition that I do, because the game is just very replayable, probably being in my top 5 most replayed games of all time, even more than the other 3D Mario Bros. Games, as those games take significantly more time to complete. I mean, I haven't beaten Sunshine still. That's on my bucket list to do, is to beat Sunshine. The main motif is repeated many times over the song, altering slightly on either instrumentation or phrasing. I think the song is a great farewell to the player, allowing them time to reminisce on the journey they just had. This, in my opinion, is just a fantastic track. Definitely only worth listening to once you beat the game, I think. You just have to beat the game to listen to this song. There's no other way around it. I think if you listen to the song by itself, it's just nothing too special. It's quite nice to listen to by itself, but I think it only gains more purpose and like emotional ties to the song once you beat the game. So yeah, beat the game if you have not beat it already, you know. That's every single one. I always enjoy playing Mario 64. As I said before, I usually beat this game at least once a year, so sometimes I forget how good the game actually is sometimes. I have never forgotten the music of the game, however. The music is just so atmospheric and fun to listen to, but it also brings me back to the times when I beat this game. The music almost just kind of brings you back to a time when games were just starting to evolve and change at a drastic rate. The graphics and sound were just starting to look even more and more like real life every year. Also, keep in mind, this is during the PlayStation and the Saturn era, so consoles were really starting to improve more and more. I mean, This was the era when PlayStation was invented. That's just crazy to me to think about how many of these games, how old some of these games actually are. I think with the evolution to the third dimension, games were able to show you more in-depth worlds than ever. You could look and move in every single direction. This is most likely before many of the viewers who may watch this video, even myself, were even born, as many of these players started playing Sunshine or Galaxy, or hell, even the DS port, like I did. But the design of the game holds up more than ever, I think. It's honestly one of those games that is just almost perfect in my mind. It's almost perfect. I think with Mario 64 ports, it's just a fantastic game that was only held back by the console it was on. If this was released now with modern graphics, modern control schemes, and all that stuff, it would be almost a flawless experience. Regardless of that, though, I think it holds up very well. And many people still cherish this game to this day, with people saying this is either the best or at least their favorite Mario Brothers game ever created.